Howard Bloom, do you think, how many conformist days have you actually led in your life?
I have probably led about 6. You never know. You never estimate yourself properly. So I've probably led more like 3,600, but I certainly have never felt I was leading a conformist day.
No, I don't think you.
I loved your tagline about seats on Friday night for a discussion of nonconformity, and please conform to showing up to the show.
Yeah, well, we ask for that one last act of conformity, and then after that on Saturday night, do what you're going to do. Hey, so Howard Bloom, always a pleasure. Am I catching you in your usual haunts tonight?
You're catching me in Buffalo, New York, where I grew up. Holed up with a cell phone in the middle of a family of about 20 people, none of whom have landlines anymore. Technology is advancing.
Well, I think and so are you. If I'm hearing you right, and you're traveling, and did they have to hold Thanksgiving in the middle of the night for you, or did you make it up a little earlier for Turkey Day?
It was close. I made it up earlier, but we did it on Friday because I have a family of workaholics. And as a consequence, none of them could make it on a Thursday. So here we all are on a Friday night. But, it's a weird night, Ian. It's a very strange night. We've just come from Thanksgiving, and literally my family 3 hours ago was standing around, and everybody was saying what he or she was delivering thanks for. We were extraordinarily grateful for a whole bunch of things you might not imagine. Well, and at the same time, we have Korea on the one side, and that's breaking out into a crisis situation. And on the other side of the world, we have the Chancellor of the Exchequer in Britain warning the British that we have to throw our lot in with the Irish and save their economy and their banking system, and warning that the next one to go could be Portugal, the one after that will need a bailout will be Spain, the one after that will be Belgium, and the one after that will be Italy. And Italy is the third biggest economy in Europe. So it's a night of it is a night where the die of our fate is being cast, and it's up to you and me to see which direction it comes out.
Well, I think the Irish banking system failures are kind of off the radar of most Americans. I know I had to do some poking around about it, and it is not yet quite gotten to that level where I think people have a working understanding of what's happening. So fill us in on that one.
Well, the bottom line is like this. First of all, huge depressions, like the one of 1929 to 1939, take place when there is a domino effect of bank collapses all over the world. When one bank rushes in to save another, discovers that it's being dragged under, reaches out to another bank to save it, that bank reaches out a hand to save it and goes under, and so on and so forth all the way around the world. And that's exactly what happened in 1931. It wasn't the crash of 1929 that started the Great Depression. Really, it was the domino collapse of banks all over the world trying to save each other in 1931. Now, right now, we're in a similar situation in that a bailout was extended. First, we extended bailouts, and we had to, and we did it it was a bipartisan thing. We started it under a Republican president, and we continued it under a Democratic president. I frankly think it was wise, as unpopular as that seems, because of the danger of these enormous credit collapses that go all the way around the world. Now, it's 2 years after October of 2008 when we had the start of the Great Crisis, our equivalent to the stock market collapse of 1929, and the Irish system has gone under. The Irish were the first to try to catch their banks before they collapsed, but the Irish government got so far into bailing out its banks with its government that its government is now unstable. So the European community, trying to protect the euro because Ireland is a part of the Eurozone, rushed in to bail out the Irish banks. And the Irish were saying right up until 3 or 4 days ago, oh, no, we don't need a bailout. We will handle this situation ourselves. Whammo. Within 2 days from today, they were finally saying yes, and they were bailed out. The English are not a part of the euro system. Nonetheless, they said the Irish are our good friends. Our economy is totally tied in with theirs. We have to be participants in this bailout. And that's when the warning came that Portugal may go next and may need a bailout. Spain may go after it and need a bailout. Well, and then Belgium and Italy. Now, if that happens, that's a replay of the Credit-Anstalt crash of 1931, because in the Credit-Anstalt crash, you had an Austrian bank. Austria? What's a bank in Austria? That's not a bank anyone takes seriously. the Austrian bank started to go under. The Austrian government made it merge with a larger bank. The larger bank couldn't handle the damage, and it began to go under. The Austrian government itself began to pick up the tab. Then the Austrian government went under. And then the Austrian coin went under. The Austrian monetary system. Nobody believed in the Austrian money at all. So you get the principle. Then Germany had to jump in to save the Austrians. Germany began to go under. Germany turned to the Americans. By the way, in the meantime, the League of Nations got involved, and something called the Bank of International Settlements got involved, which is exactly the bank that was involved last week with Ireland. And America jumped in.
That's the subject of the book, When Money Dies, and I've been reading that lately, and I think we're going to have that author on, I hope we are, coming up on Coast to Coast. Are you familiar with that book, When Money Dies?
No, but it sounds like a very interesting book.
Yeah. It's very similar to that idea. Now, okay, so that's part of what's going on in Ireland. Let's frame that against what is going on the Korean Peninsula. How did this whole thing get started? I mean, I know you watch these international players and how they bump into each other. What's going on there?
Well, it's been going on. You know that it's been going on since 1948 when the communists took over China, and in 1951, which is only 3 years after the establishment of this government that nobody could believe in. A bunch of people from the hills. That's what the Maoists were. Mao Zedong's followers. A bunch of people who've been in the hills for 15 years. A bunch of people in the hills are taking over the biggest nation on the face of the earth. That was ludicrous. Well, with Chinese encouragement, North Korea invaded South Korea in 1951. And when we were hoping that the Chinese would rein back the North Koreans, the Chinese instead sent in troops. Well, China's in a very peculiar situation right now. Things have changed dramatically in the world since 1951. In 1951, China was a pauper. And the United States was the richest country in the world. And we were selling so much export stuff, so many of our goods, that it was ridiculous. Everybody wanted to buy goods from us. In 1973, things began to change. We ran a balance of payments deficit. In other words, we needed to buy more goods from the outside world, and the outside world needed to buy goods from us. And today, we're running the biggest trade deficit in the history of humanity. It is a $500 billion trade deficit a year, and $250 billion of that is our deficit to China. And China has the biggest trade surpluses of any nation in the history of the world. So China's history in the world has changed dramatically since 1948, but these two countries, South Korea and North Korea, have never made peace, and you know that.
Right. But I mean, but what happened more recently that started this new conflict between them?
Well, the new conflict between them is that and you know all of this, that South Korea's head is the son of the militarist Stalinist who started North Korea and who started the Korean War, and that son has been in very poor health for the last 3 years. And last week, he made a public presentation of one of his sons as the person who would take over this Stalinist dynasty. And the son needs to establish his authority somehow. And the only thing that counts in North Korea is military power, because the military runs the country. The military is the country. And he needed to show that he's got backbone and spine, and he won't take any guff. And there are certain territories that are disputed still between South Korea and North Korea. So he had to basically unleash an artillery barrage on one of these disputed islands in order to show that he's a tough guy. And he can walk the very line between world war and peace. And he has now done that.
And then, of course, there's the inevitable, moment or two where everybody holds their breath on retaliation. Other than diplomatic, I have to say in the last 24 hours, I've kind of checked out on Korea. What else has been happening in this, fanning the flames of war?
Well, Korea has continued shelling. It hasn't continued shelling that island. It's apparently been doing the shelling all within its own territory this time. But that's been scaring the pants off of the South Koreans. Meanwhile, the Chinese are in a very strange position. Here they are now, in essence, the world's leading power in many ways. They're the world's leading power in the sense that they do have the biggest world trade surplus. They do make all the goods that all the world wants at this point. And they have a substantial military. They've always had a substantial military. The number of men in their military is bigger than ours. Now, in many ways, we're the biggest power. And, for example, today or yesterday, in gold trading, the price of gold went down because of this crisis, and the price of the dollar went up because a lot of people have confidence that the one place you can park yourself and your money is the United States. And the world is still wondering. Now, wars are matters of perception, and crashes are matters of perception. When people lose confidence in a money, that's when the money disappears. When people lose confidence in an economy, that's when the economy goes under. And the same thing is true of war. When people are uncertain about who's at number one and who's at number two, that's when wars start. And when the titular position, when the country or the nation that we regard as number one no longer really is number one, but the situation hasn't yet shifted, that's when the situation tends to get into a world war that shifts the balance so that it reflects the reality. We don't want to get into one of those situations. We got into them in World War I when a person from a country nobody had ever heard of, Serbia, shot a prince that nobody had ever heard of because he was the son of the Emperor of Austria, but he'd never held power. And it seemed to be an insignificant thing in an insignificant little territory. And again, because of a domino effect, because then Germany felt it had to get involved to support its ally in Serbia, and then the French felt that they had to get involved to support their allies. And before long, we had a war that was unbelievable, World War I. And World War I, more men lost their lives in the Battle of the Somme. In 3 days, 200,000 people lost their lives in the Battle of the Somme. We think 4,000 people over the course of 7 years is a big deal.
Right. No, it's
in a few days.
Staggering numbers. So, which one, as you're looking at the oh, and by the way, in Ireland, the monetary system is fiat. It's not backed by gold or any holdings.
I don't know, Ian. I'm not. I don't follow that aspect of things.
Okay. Well, I mean, it only makes a difference in that when you're mentioning about gold and how you feel about, that so much of our faith determines the ability of a currency to survive. If it's actually backed by something, then you don't have to worry so much about a leap of faith into an economic system. If it is just paper, if there is nothing to back it up, then yes, it requires some active participation by the bearer of the dollar that it's worth something or it becomes worth nothing.
Well, here's the trick. You read this in The Genius of the Beast. Even gold is just a symbol for our confidence. Because after all, what can you do with gold? It's a symbol just like a piece of paper is a symbol. So we can lose our faith in that, too, at some point. It's just that we've had gold as part of our scaffolding of habit, our infrastructure of habit for a long, long, long time.
Well,
we've only had the dollars for 150 years.